Teachers of Reddit, why are you choosing the quiet kid over the kid with a raised hand? It's a type of formative assessment. You try your best to get all students to answer questions to test knowledge. The kid with their hand up usually does it regularly, and more often than not they know the answer, so you need to involve others that don't get involved enough. That's why I love whiteboards. Everyone has to answer, not just the kids that always raise their hand. And kids are allowed to hold up a blank board if they don't know. Clickers are great for these formative assessments as well. As a teacher, if I only call on the students with hands up, I get lots of correct answers and convince myself that I taught the whole class well, but did I really? So I need to randomly call on students and see if the class is really learning. I use a random selector to do this. It makes my job harder and I don't like it any more than the students like it. I would love to just game at correct answers and congratulate myself and how well I teach. But that's not really teaching, so I must call on the entire class. I am not a teacher, but I always assumed it was to try and get them to be more involved / to feel more involved and seen / to feel they are heard and acknowledged, especially if they appear to be depressed. I was that quiet kid who usually knew the answer but hated talking in class. I hated participation marks, and only felt comfortable once I got to university and got to have smaller seminars with 10 to 15 people. I never liked it. I never did it unless I was forced to, and I did well all through school and have multiple degrees. So no, forcing kids to participate so they get over their dislike / anxiety of class participation is not necessary to success. Exactly. I'm an introvert myself. What if the quiet kid has anxiety or is an introvert? Wouldn't calling on them make it worse? That was definitely me. Even when I knew that I could answer the question correctly, I would panic and mess it up. Especially in elementary school. I got 100% on every test, plus if there were bonus questions I would get those too. Why wasn't that enough? It's called cold calling. It can work well if you know your students. You aren't going to call on the student whom you know will have a breakdown. It can redirect students' focus back to the lesson. Some students do not pay attention because they know they won't be called on if their hand isn't up. Quite often there is something in the school reports that relate to interacting with the class. This gives students the opportunity to. In a normal classroom situation, I do not ask students who did not raise their hands to answer a question. I simply analyze if they do so out of embarrassment, ignorance or interest, and I try to advance on that point so that in the future they want to participate. However, this year in Argentina all the classes have been by video call and I need them to participate and evaluate them in class. However, to those students who seem shy to participate, I ask them about opinions or a critical look on the subject studied and not so much on concepts and questions that may have a bad answer. Sorry for my English. As the student I can tell you why I'm both. I guarantee you the teachers that do this were extroverted in school. I am extremely introverted, and I call on kids that aren't dying to give me the answer. I do it sensitively and I know my students pretty well because I ask a lot of questions and listen to them. My classroom isn't an environment where we are all waiting on someone to mess up. We talk to each other and encourage each other, and a lot of times kids just say they don't know and it's fine. We move on or we tell them where to find an answer. The really quiet kids I usually don't call on until the end of the second quarter when I know them pretty well. Sounds like you had some scrap teachers. I'm sorry. Personally, I warn my students before, say, watching a short 4-minute video and tell individual students, or a disruptive desk group, I will be asking them a question. Then they don't poop themselves on the spot and pay attention. They also give way better responses. I had a maths teacher at high school who had a knack for spotting when a kid might know the answer but was too shy to raise their hand, so he'd scan the room and pick on the one who looked like they might know the answer. I was smart at school, but so painfully shy, and he helped my confidence so much. The ones that intentionally pick on the quiet/awkward ones can get fucked though. I still remember my German teacher shouting at me, in German, to close the window, the day after the class learnt the word for window, when I'd been off sick. Schließe das Fenster. Oder, mach das Fenster zu. The worst is when no one has their hand up, so the teacher picks on you cause you probably know the answer. Imagine if Professor Sprout only ever called on Hermione because her hand was raised. Neville might never have realized his innate herbology skills. The kid with the raised hand has the confidence to be involved. If you don't start engaging the students unwilling to engage and get them interested, that habit forms throughout their entire academic career. That did the complete opposite effect for me and started my long hatred for school. Unfortunately, the approach used with you in terms of inclusion was possibly done badly or without sensitivity. It's all in the way the question is put. Sometimes you might simply state a fact/idea and then ask the quiet kids if they agree, for example yes or no. No need for them to elaborate, even a nod or shake of the head. The kids are then included without feeling they are put on the spot. Another way is to talk with the individuals in the lead up to the questions to make sure they know an answer and then ask them if they would like to volunteer their ideas. They can feel confident of getting it correct then with no pressure. You can even say, such and such was just telling me that. Putting kids on the spot who you know are shy/introverted is never the appropriate way to go. A positive rapport is the key to questioning and inclusion, and never shut a kid down or tell them outright they are wrong. This will certainly lead to disillusionment, resentment and disengagement. As a teacher, it makes me furious when I see this happen. You need to assess comprehension and learning as you teach. Doesn't matter if you think you're giving the best lesson ever if the kids aren't learning from it. So, I don't care that the kid with their hand raised knows the answer, probably they do since they're raising their hand. I care if the majority of the class knows the answer, including and especially the quiet kid. They have to face their anxiety eventually. This is coming from the 22 years who is still facing their anxiety. I never call on a student who doesn't have their hand up. If I want a quiet student to be more involved, it's usually in smaller group settings where they're working on questions with their peers. If I'm telling them to share their answers after, I might go up to one of my quieter students and say, hey Jessie, can you share the answer to number 5 when we discuss the assignment later as a class? A lot of kids have really bad anxiety, and giving them that heads up helps. Calling their name when their hand isn't up doesn't help, and it's not actually engagement if they either A, get embarrassed because they don't know the answer, or B, know the answer but didn't want to speak up in the first place. You are an amazing teacher for having this insight, because we know the kid raising their hand knows the answer, but we're trying to get the whole class involved in the conversation. Lol. I wouldn't advise posting rants here. Not a teacher, but I assume it's to get the whole class involved, since you usually have a few eager kids who always answer. Just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean it should be avoided. The point of asking students to speak in class is more than just looking to confirm an answer, it's trying to get kids to talk. I prefer first having kids talk to each other, then asking, hey Fred, what did your group talk about? This gives Fred a safer environment to speak because he doesn't have to take full ownership over what was said. Also, while kids are talking about the answer, I can listen in on Fred's group and make sure it's an idea worth bringing up, which can help give Fred and his group confidence. I should also add, my main goal in class isn't getting kids to talk to me, or even to speak in front of the whole class, but to get kids to talk to each other. Because the kid with the raised hand already answered the last 8 questions, and I heard the quiet kid say the answer under their breath, or saw they wrote it correctly and want to give them a chance to shine. Simple torture, you idiot. For me, I call on THW kids without their hands up because it is an ESL classroom with 43 students in it. I have to make sure all kids are listening. Depending on the question, I will call on my A-level or B-level students. Plus, in my situation it is not always the quiet kid. I use this method when the classes are off task and talking. I use it to give daily points for being prepared and working. All questions come from the passages we are currently reading aloud in class. I'm still in uni for this, but I've been told to ask all students equally for answers. It's a way to see if students are understanding. I was the quiet kid in school and I hated getting called on when my hand was down, but I get why they do it now, Lamau. to try to get them involved and raise their confidence. I only choose the shy kids if I know they know the answer. For example, if they've been doing individual work, we'll often go through them afterwards, especially questions that some of the students struggled with. I walk around the class while they're doing individual work anyway, so I know who managed which questions, and if I know one of the shy kids got a particular one right, I might say, "Andy, would you like to show us how you did question 5? Another reason is if one of the not-so-shy kids is chatting or seems distracted, I'll ask them a direct question to try to re-engage them in the class. However, again, I'll make sure it's something well within their capabilities. Because the teaching isn't in the answers, it's in the thinking. I've been both of those kids. Educators need to find better ways of engaging all the students than bringing the class's attention to the one kid who doesn't want any of it for whatever reason that may be. I'm a student teacher, for a scholarship, not training to become a teacher, and I only recently, this is my 3rd semester teaching, started calling kids who haven't raised their hands because I've spent the best part of 12 weeks being entirely ignored by students, and I know they almost all know the answer. I have one student per class who is always willing to put their hand up and get the answer right. I have about 80% of students who almost always answer correctly if I ask them personally, and do occasionally answer if I ask the class. And the rest of them, about 1 or 2 per class, who just outright do not listen to what I teach. I'm just tired of being ignored, so by letting them know I'm not afraid to ask them by name hopefully helps them realize they need to start taking notes about what I tell them. Because the purpose of asking the class questions is to maintain engagement and get feedback if everyone gets what I'm saying. The kid with their hand up 24/7 is already engaged and gets it. The quiet one is a mystery, and as a teacher it's important I know what stage everyone is at, and know they're at least trying.